Guys, how's it going? Seán here. Today we're going to take a look at the main synth in Driver by Pendulum. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. Please consider subscribing if you want to see some more guitar and production videos from me. If you've been following this channel for a while, this is probably a bit of a strange and unexpected video. I have quite a strange and varied taste in music. In truth, I'm a massive drum and bass fan, and it's probably the genre that got me into producing music in the first place. Anyway, one of my favorite groups, Pendulum, are back with 2 new tracks after 10 years. So what I thought I'd do is remake a little bit of one of the new tracks and make a little tutorial. So I've got the Ableton session open up in front of me. The main synth that we're going to take a look at today is this. Alright, so this patch is made up of 2 different SERUM patches. Here in this instrument rack, I've got the 2 synths layered together. I also have this audio effect rack with a load of processors. Alright, so let me bypass the effects rack. Here's what the 2 synths layered together sound like on their own with no post-processing. So for this first layer, this is what the synth sounds like just out of SERUM. I've got some effects going on. I'm just going to take those off as well, and let's work it out right from the start. So I've got 2 oscillators running in this patch. Oscillator A is just this basic shape set to a saw wave. I've got 7 voices of unison, and the detune's just turned up a little bit. For the sub oscillator, I'm also using it as a square wave. These are both set to -1, same octave. Here's what the oscillators sound like on their own. So I've got these 2 oscillators run into the filter. Filter set to the Formant 1 filter type. Got the cutoff just above halfway, resonance about the same. Got the drive up halfway as well, and I just dialed in the Formant to try and nail that Formant sound. So you might notice as the notes are sustained, you start getting some volume automation. A little trick in SERUM, if you click this level and mix button, it's set to mix by default, but if you click it, you can get a level. It's basically a master level before the synth section hits all of the effects, which is really, really handy. So what I'm doing is I'm using LFO 1 here to adjust the volume of the filter. I have it set to a 16th note triangle wave, but I have this rise set to a half note. So the volume automation isn't at the start of the notes, but the longer a note is sustained, you get some cool volume modulation. So here's what it sounds like again. For envelope 2, I just have this set up as a snappy kind of decay, and I have that just affecting the filter cutoff as well. So at the start of the notes, we get a little variation in the Formant filter. Lastly, before we move on to the effects, you can see I've got envelope 3 here set to a really, really sharp, snappy, plucky kind of shape. I've got the attack at 0, sustain at 0, and the decay at 11 milliseconds, so really short. And basically I'm using this to modulate the master pitch to add a sharp kind of attack at the start of each note. Let me just turn it up and show you what it's doing. It's just a neat way to add a tiny bit of attack at the start of each note. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the synth. From here, we're running into the effects. So I've just got some phaser. Got some distortion. Now I'm also using envelope 2 here, the same envelope I used to affect the filter cutoff to affect the drive amount. So just again add some attack to the start of the note. From here we're using the hyper dimension. Next we're using a flanger. And then lastly we're using the compressor set to the multiband mode, OTT style. So that's pretty much it for the synth straight out of SERUM. From here I'm using the HG2, the black box by Plugin Alliance. Because this sound is quite rich and there's quite a lot of saturation, quite a lot of distortion, and also the Formant filter starts creating some weird kind of harmonics. I'm just using this FabFilter Pro Q to kind of like cut out any of those harsh frequencies. So Okay, so that's it for the Formant patch. Underneath that, I've got this Reese layer. I just have a FabFilter Pro Q3 here. I'm just going to turn that off and let's just hear what it sounds like straight out of SERUM. Okay, so let me turn off this distortion and let me turn off the filter. Here's what the oscillator sounds like on its own. So this shape looks like a sine wave, but it's actually cut off in the edges. So it actually has a bit of a saw wave quality to it as well. And I basically did this by adding in some kind of harmonics in the editor here. What this does is it actually retains a lot of bottom end and a sub bass like a sine wave does, but it adds a little bit of edge to it as well, which is kind of cool. But you can see I've got two voices of unison here. The detune is turned down quite a lot. In the global settings, instead of it being at 100, I actually have it turned down to 50, so it's not 100% left and right. So if we look at the pitch bend here, you might be able to notice we get that kind of detuned Reese bass movement on the sustain notes, but not at the start notes. And the way I did that is by going into the modulation matrix, and I'm using the pitch bend as a source to affect the amount of detune in our oscillator. I actually didn't use oscillator B at all, so let me just get rid of that real quick. So basically, when the pitch bend increases, obviously we get that change in pitch, but it also acts as a modulator for the amount of detune. From here, we're running into a low pass filter. I've got the drive and the fat dials turned up quite a bit, so that's adding quite a lot of body to it. From here in the effects section, I just have some hard clipping on the distortion. And the last thing I have in this patch is the exact same thing I did in the other layer too. I'm using envelope 2 here with a sharp kind of plucky decay shape. Basically, I'm adjusting the coarse pitch of the oscillator, so we're getting that nice little pitch click at the start of each note. Basically, it adds quite a lot of power in the low end, which works really, really well for these style of basses. So here's what it sounds like straight out of SERUM. From here, I'm using this FabFilter Pro Q3. This was just to kind of dial it in and blend it with the layer above. So I'm cutting out quite a lot of the mids, boosting a little bit of the upper mids to the high end. And then I'm using a low pass filter to just get rid of any excess highs that we don't need. Here are the two layers we just went over together. Okay, so I'm doing quite a lot of post-processing on this sound. So starting off, we've got the Black Box HG2 again. Here's what it sounds like. Because all of these effects are processing the Formant layer and the sub layer together, you have to be careful when using saturation and distortion on the entire signal, because if you add too much of it, it can actually ruin your low end. The reason I'm using the Black Box is it's actually really, really good for retaining a lot of the bottom end. So this is really, really cool for this type of bass. Next up, we've got Saturn 2. Basically, I'm just adding some more distortion. Saturn 2 is amazing for this because I'm just affecting the mid band with the gentle saturation and the high band with the warm tube. And because it's a multi-band processor and we can dial in these crossover frequencies, I can basically leave the sub bass intact and just have the distortion affecting the higher frequencies, which is really, really neat. From here, I'm using another FabFilter Pro Q3, and this is just removing some of the harsh ringing frequencies that were kind of more present after we added that much distortion. So here it is bypassed. Next up, we've got FabFilter Pro MB multiband. This is just solidifying the low end so we have a nice constant level. And lastly, we've got this Mag EQ4. I didn't actually have this on initially. I felt it actually needed a little bit more high end in the mix. Here is everything we've gone over up to this point in the context of the mix. And here is with this EQ4 added. I'm basically boosting a high shelf at 2.5K, and I'm using this really cool airband, which is actually boosting 40 kilohertz, so we can't even hear it. But what it does is it adds quite a lot of like presence in the frequencies we can hear, which is really, really nice. So here it is with the EQ4. Alright, so that was a quick look at the main bass patch in Driver by Pendulum. It was a bit of a happy accident the way I put this together, and it's definitely not exactly like the original sound. Rob Swire's an absolute genius, and I don't think I got it to sound as good as his. But yeah, be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and please consider subscribing if you haven't already, if you want to see some more content from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.